All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second installment of our mini series of lectures on the themes of the Arthurian legends. And indeed, if you find them interesting, I have many more on the various figures of the Arthurian myths, so we could continue it into the future, but that remains to be seen. Also, when something comes to my mind with my geriatric memory, I need to respond to it because I might never remember it again, and that's why I am mentioning that in the coming month of February, it is my hope that in spite of all obstacles, we would hold our annual tarot forecast, which we have done for many years. I am running into a little bit of personnel problem because my longtime friend and helper, Brian Campbell, is preoccupied with his family and he can't get away like he used to. But he'll be able to get away sometimes, and then when we have the projectionist, then we will hold it. But we may have to announce that in the course of the month rather than at the first part. So it'll be always announced on our website, and we will hold a tarot forecast. It's always been interesting in the past. I don't see why it shouldn't be interesting now. So that's about the only important issue at the moment, except perhaps that I thought I'll sound a little personal note. If some of you may have been wondering over the last few weeks or so as to why I do this a lot, the reason is that I am reminded sometimes by signals by my beloved projectionist, who is of course my wife, that I foam at the mouth like somebody who has what in German we call the Tollwut, you know, which is which dogs get in the summertime and things like that. And so there is no other reason for it except that I have a dry mouth from a certain medicine. Anyway, that wasn't really necessary, but maybe it may have explained some perplexity on the part of some of you. All right, that will go on now in the second one of our Arthurian dicta. And in that regard, I am going to start with a few sentences which may appear to be totally unrelated to the subject, but you know, I have a way of getting around to those things, and so I will. And I have a quotation here by Friedrich Nietzsche, who said madness is something rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, peoples, and ages, it is a rule. And this sort of seemed very apposite to me to, let's say, ideas and theories that are floating around in the culture, maybe always, but particularly at the present time, and which is really quite important in terms of an insightful study of mythology, as we are trying to undertake, namely that the development of the soul, psyche, as psychology calls it, is a matter for the individual. There is no real spiritual development other than at the individual level. From time to time there come up ideas and practices and political movements and so forth who lead you to believe that great and wonderful expansions of consciousness, as well as heaven knows many other expansions of your money, can be had en masse, as we call it in French. And it is my belief, based on a lot of experience and on the experience of others, that that notion is false. As the more do we enter the mass of humanity, usually the less real consciousness is there present. And this has been recognized by the wise in every age. Now I'll shock you, and I love to do that, but only up to a point. You know, when you start throwing old vegetables or things at me, I don't like vegetables anyway, so don't do that. Don't do that. But let's say Plato, you know what system of government that existed at that time on and off in Greece did Plato say that was the worst? Democracy. But of course the meaning of democracy, let's say, was different at that time than at the present time. And what he meant really thereby is something like maybe today we could call, if we coin a new term, mobocracy, because the larger the bunch, the less consciousness. The Romans had a saying which Jung repeated, and which was senatus bestia, senatores boni viri in Latin. The Senate is a beast, but the senators are good men. So you see, when we are dealing with a mass, we have the abaissement du niveau mental, as the French call it. We have a lowering of consciousness. The more people, the less consciousness. And Jung, of course, while quoting Nietzsche, Jung said that when you have people in a big group, in a big mass, then the big mass becomes one perfect idiot. So he had the Swiss forthrightness to state things in this fashion. Now, why am I bringing this up? And I am bringing it up, I think, primarily because this principle pertains in a very direct manner to the study of mythology, and I would say that if you are interested in it, in the kind of interpretation of mythologems that I try to put forth. I am certainly not the only one. I am tremendously indebted to people like Joseph Campbell and his teacher Heinrich Zimmer, and to C.G. Jung and others, wherein we take, as you will soon hear, where we'll take one or several figures of a particular mythology, and then we interpret the events in the life of that mythological character as pertaining to the development of our own psyche. So that, let's say, last week we spoke about Merlin, and I tried to interpret the figure of Merlin to a major extent in the sense that we are all Merlin, you see, and that in our psycho-spiritual development, in the changes in our inner consciousness, we undergo experiences which are not unlike the myth of Merlin. And the same thing we will apply to Lancelot du Lac, as he is called in the French versions tonight. Now, this does not mean that the Arthurian myths, for instance, cannot be or should not be interpreted sometimes in a wider sense. So it is quite likely, for instance, that there was a King Arthur, and then he became a mythological character, and various other issues of that sort. But I think the greatest benefit that we can derive from any mythology of East or West, or if there are any North and South as well, is by recognizing within the mythologems matters of our own psycho-spiritual development, and in other words, a way of interpreting these stories internally, as if they illustrated certain developments within ourselves. And that is therefore what we shall do. In fact, Jung, I think, was very wise, well, in many respects, but when he named the kind of psycho-spiritual development that he envisioned for humans, and that he in his psychology was trying to facilitate, in the sense of calling it individuation, which in that case is derived from the German individuum, which is an individual, but which really comes from the Latin meaning an indivisible unity. That the objective of the human psychological development is to become an indivisible unity. So that is good as a general background to call to our attention once again why we are interpreting so many of the mythologems, in this case of the Arthurian legends, in intrapsychic terms. Now, we know, of course, and we have so stated in our little mini publicity that we have, that that Lancelot, whom we are to address ourselves this evening, is a figure obviously as within his story, or very closely connected with romance, with love, with passion, and that thus he has, even as Merlin, on the other hand, is the prime magical figure in the Arthurian myths. Lancelot, in turn, is the lover. And that this is of some importance, even in the kind of interpretation that we attach to these figures. So obviously Lancelot, like all the other big figures, with the exception of the women, to whom we shall address ourselves next week, Lancelot is a knight. They are all knights. And here we also have to remember that the mythological use of the concept of knighthood needs to be separated from the purely mundane and historical explanation. First of all, the whole phenomenon of knighthood had certain underlying psycho-spiritual elements. It was not just the creation of a special category of warriors who are going to go out and chop heads and perhaps risk the possibility of having their own head chopped off. So it wasn't a purely military issue, but it actually represented a development, an evolution, and a very good evolution of the concept of warfare within a certain medieval period, and much of that, of course, then continued for a considerable period of time. And that being that there are certain, really certain spiritual underpinnings of even those who practice the art of warfare. And that there are matters of honor, there are matters of compassion, there are matters of really of a spiritual and perhaps even quasi-religious nature that should be introduced into warfare. And they represented, or they were represented by the knightly code. And in fact, if we look at this from a purely secular historical point of view, then I think we will discover that as knighthood declined and ultimately faded into nothing, the miseries, the cruelty, the inhumanity of warfare increased. So the loss of the knightly idea was a great loss for humanity. And conversely, when knighthood was in flower, there were certain ideals, important ideals, good ideals, helpful ideals that were present in warfare that were subsequently lost, and that perhaps were only minimally present even before. So these issues also have to be kept in mind. But Lancelot is definitely one of the knights. You see, Merlin was a magician. He was outside. He was sort of the constant inspirer and companion of the knights, but he was not a knight himself. Lancelot is. Sir Lancelot of the Lake, or Lancelot du Lac, as he is known, in the French version of the great story. Interestingly enough, he is in many ways more of an anti-hero and less of a hero in romantic terms, in terms of the romance, in terms of the story. In certain ways, he is not a very sympathetic character, which of course would be described with the word anti-hero. He is a tragic troublemaker who becomes the cause in the story of really the downfall of King Arthur's entire establishment, and he contributes to the destruction of Camelot. Now that is not a very sympathetic role, but it is connected with certain deeper issues which we hope to explore. So all the other heroes, such as Gawain and Owain and Arthur himself, all the others are really rather uncomplicated, manly, aggressive, and in some ways rather simple-minded representatives of the medieval knightly psyche. They are brave, they are honorable, they are straightforward, they are subject to but valiantly resisting temptation. So they are made medieval Christian soldiers who unwittingly and certainly unconsciously manifest some of the mysterious inner light or esoteric content of the entire Arthurian cycle of legendary. One way it could be expressed, if one chooses to do so, is that they are ordinary men in whose life the extraordinary has appeared. If you have some familiarity with the events in the Arthurian cycle, then you will readily recognize that. And they are also men who thus become in many ways the living conjunctions of the opposites consisting of ordinariness and extraordinariness. Because there are pretty ordinary people as such, who, however, continue to experience extraordinary things, which is probably primarily manifest in the frequent appearance of incredibly mysterious and occult apparitions and events and beings that appear at the court of Arthur. Every one of the legends, the individual legends, usually start, 2 or 3 months after Christmas, where the knights were all together around the round table and at the court, and then the door opened and boom, something really wild and weird comes in, then from that develops a particular story. So ordinary people who experience extraordinary things. This conjoining those two, and this pattern, I think, has great merit for our contemplation, because it has a message, I think, for the vast majority of humankind. Most people in this world are quite ordinary, although to tell that to their faces is usually that you don't make friends that way, but they are. They are persons of common origins, uneventful lives, pedestrian goals, and unexciting dreams. Can you think of anything more ordinary than that combination? They are people who, by their own human nature, would simply be just living in what the existentialists called the triviality of everydayness. Very good expression, incidentally. We are all experiencing it to a great extent these last couple of years, the triviality of everydayness. If that fact has bypassed you so far, then you haven't been too observant. And yet there is something mysterious there that doesn't appear right on the surface. The common ordinary men and women, the Gawains and the Owains, can and often are called to greater things. Into every man's and woman's life, we might say metaphorically, the Green Knight stalks at certain times, uttering a fearful and yet alluring channel, because that is one of the ways in which the mysteriousness enters the circle of Arthur's court. What Jung once called a premonition of an inescapable world of shadows was one of my favorite sentences of Jung, especially when I wrote my first book, the Gnostic Jung, about him. The premonition of an inescapable world of shadows comes into the life of ordinary, common individuals. Some heed the premonition and others do not. Some respond to the challenge of the Green Knights and of the Countesses of the Fountain, the mysterious beings who make their appearance, and others do not. Some respond to the challenge of the Green Knight particularly. So what happens is that the miracle has chosen them, but they did not choose the miracle. And thus the process of the mystery often cannot go on. The alchemical opus cannot progress to its culmination. Because when the mystery enters our own lives, we need to respond to it. And we need to respond to it in certain ways. Otherwise, our experience has been for naught. Ordinariness has taken over. The everyday world has driven out the mystery. The profane has exorcised the sacred. And such is the fate of the majority of persons in every age and at all times. It's not so much that we lead or have led or shall be leading uninteresting lives, but that we don't respond to that which is truly interesting for various reasons. So I'm sorry to put it that way, but if we have led or are leading a life bereft of the truly exciting mystery, it's really our fault. The mystery was there. It came, but we did not respond properly. However, it's never too late. So don't feel put down by this statement. So while such conditions prevail the world over and throughout history, among the ordinary conditions of a very different kind, make themselves known among the extraordinary people. So they come into everybody's house. But there are some who already have certain extraordinary responsiveness or capacities, and there they make themselves known more powerfully. Also, at certain times in our lives, we may encounter the exciting, the mysterious, the other, so to say. But then, two things are important. One is that we should not forget the ineffable greatness that we may have experienced at certain times. Because memory is a cruel master. And it not only a master, but memory is a cruel thief. It tries to steal from us our treasure that we have experienced in the past. Because if we don't recall it, and if we don't recall it in a certain intensity of affect, then we have lost it. It has been stolen from us. And that is something that we should not permit. But it easily happens because the human psyche has so many layers and so many functions that some of them will do that to us. But we have to resist it. It's really quite an important matter, quite an important issue. Now, there are, of course, and there always have been, and it is it's just a matter of forthright honesty to admit that there are always in every group of people, whether it is small or large, some really extraordinary people. There are the Merlins, and there are people like Lancelot. And there the process is obviously somewhat different. These people are the ones who ultimately, if their story becomes known, as it certainly has become known in the Arthurian myth and so forth, these are the figures that really have enchanted and fascinated the common mind. These are the weird people. And you know, the term weird, which was used a good deal in its old English sense by a man whom I very greatly admired, the late Alan Watts. Alan Watts, who used it in a very positive sense. One of his famous mottos was, "Everyone is entitled to his own weird." In other words, we are extraordinary people, and we have within us something extraordinary. And it should be expressed. Of course, it should be expressed in a way that we don't harm anybody or harm ourselves, but it should come forth. And that is to a very great extent what individuation is all about. It's the kind of alchemical, internal, magical transformation that brings forth elements, insights, wisdom, figures, experiences that we didn't have the faintest notion that we possessed. And all of a sudden, here they are, they're coming forth. In this sense, let's say, the unusual people, the people who have the weird to begin with, are often seen as anti-heroes. Why? Because envy is one of the most prominent and most disastrous human characteristics. Entire political systems have been built upon them, and you know what I mean. It means you've got something that I haven't got. And as Gollum would say by Tolkien, I want it, my precious, I want it, and I will take it away from you, even if I have to kill you. Envy, and this is, it's something that we all have and that we have to combat, let us say. And so then obviously these people, the really unusual people, they appear as anti-heroes. The congenital weird ones of this world, and certainly one of their shining mythic examples is Lancelot du Lac. Now Lancelot, like all, or actually like the other Arthurian heroes, with the exception probably of Merlin, because Merlin belongs into a different category. But the Lancelot, like the other Arthurian heroes, was a quite ordinary human being of ordinary human parentage. You may remember that we said about Merlin that he was born and conceived and born under very peculiar circumstances, and if you look into the varieties of the legend, I mean, as a small child he changed into a fish and lived as a fish, a salmon. At least a fairly tasty fish at that. He lived as a salmon under the waters and all kinds of things like that. So that's the really very extraordinary. And Lancelot was born on the human auspices. His father was King Ban of Bemwick, and he was baptized not Lancelot but Galahad. The name inherited eventually by his child, his natural son. Lancelot, the original Galahad, while still an infant, was carried away by a mysterious fairy creature. So he was born quite ordinary human, but then the extraordinariness came about. And this fairy creature came to be known in the legend as the Lady of the Lake, a watery feminine being who bestowed, among other things, the magic sword Excalibur on King Arthur. The Lady of the Lake takes away his baby name, his Christian name Galahad, and names him Lancelot of the Lake. So that's how he becomes Lancelot. She also bestows on him a magic ring, which carried the power of defeating all sorcery and made him a match for dragons and other weird creatures. Well, that's quite a gift, One wonders why we don't meet the Lady of the Lake. And you know, we have a lake not very far from here. So it's called Lake Hollywood. You know, it's a reservoir, but it's a beautiful lake. Maybe we should go there more often. I used to earlier on when I was younger and more mobile. But you know, who knows? We might go there and outreach is this scaly feminine hand and hands of a sword. Heaven knows what we could do with that sword. In any event, I don't think it's going to happen, or not right now anyway. He also became the inheritor of a sword of distinguished but terrible history, another sword, which was the sword that belonged once to a knight by the name of Sir Balin, who did many terrible things with that sword, including a terrible attack on the Lady of the Lake herself. Galahad, who becomes the Lancelot of the lake, inherits several interesting and magical objects which are all bestowed on him by the Lady of the Lake. And he's still quite a young man. And so early in his early life is sort of the archetype of what I like to call the pneumatic Gnostic life. He was born in the world among mundane circumstances, and such persons are early in life abducted into the watery recesses of the unconscious, as Jung would call them, the inner mystery, by our own Lady of the Lake, our own Anima, our own mysterious inspiratrix, the Lady of the mystery of the hidden wisdom. There is a nice little short poem by Edgar Allan Poe, which is entitled Alone. And I'm reading this in part because when I encountered it, I felt that Edgar Allan Poe was speaking for me, which is really what a good poet should do. And I'm sure you will have perhaps similar feelings about it. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. For the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still. From the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the thunder and the storm, and the clouds that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view. That's the point. It's very, very precious to me for a variety of reasons, which, however, I will not share with you. So when the lady abducts us, we receive a new name. This is, you find that in all kinds of, East and West, for instance, in the monastic life, whether a Buddhist monk or a Cistercian monk or a Benedictine, or in the old monastic orders, they receive a new monastic name, for instance. Or in magical orders, like the illustrious Order of the Golden Dawn of past years, people receive a new name when they are initiated. A new identity. So now he is told, you are not Galahad, son of Ben, you are Lancelot, and you are mine, saith the Lady of the Lake. And when he answers, who are you? Then she might say something that we find in one of the Gnostic Gospels. We are his sons, the children of the living Father and Mother. So the chosen have a new identity. They belong to the other kingdom. They are not human beings as this is ordinarily understood. Living in the lake. I mean, this is a little bit like Merlin. You have to remember, you're living in the lake like a fish, you're not an actual fish like Merlin. We also need to remember that ancient, going clear back to Roman times, so 1st, 2nd century, the sacred symbol of Jesus Christ was a fish, the ichthos. Now there are various linguistic reasons for that we don't need to go into. We might ask why. Because this is the being that can live in an alien element, alien to him or maybe to us. And what is that alien element? This world. A weird, like the weird glistening world of the waters, the unconscious, the mystery, the gnosis, the other. So you might see we are all twice fishes. You really think that this is a fish story or it's a fishy story. But first of all, if we take that mythos to heart, the Gnostic Hermetic mythos says that we don't belong here. We didn't originate here. Physically we may have, but not otherwise. And that's why we are so weird. Or as Goethe says in the Faust, there are two souls that dwell in my breast. And you might say one of them is from above and one of them is from below, depending on how you interpret those directions. But so this is true of us. And it's true of great figures like magical figures like Christ, because if you look at the New Testament, or even more so the Gnostic Gospels, Thomas's also, you will see that the figure of the founder of the Christian tradition, his relatively short life, he was like a fish out of water. He wasn't in his own proper element by his own admission, although he functioned with it with singular spiritual power. And so it is with others. We are really fish out of water. And it's that kind of an introduction to that kind of life that befalls Lancelot. Then the lady prepared Lancelot for his life. And for the time when he will leave the lake after his dwelling there, and then live in the external, the human world once more. She gives him a ring of power, and she gives it to us too, which protects us against things that might harm us or deflect us from our true purpose. Sorcery, dragons, weird monsters. Why? Because the chosen are not harmed by some things that harms ordinary folk. And so that is one of the gifts that comes to him. Jesus says in the New Testament, the gates of hell will not prevail against this these people, this church that I have founded. And so that is kind of the protective element that comes to Lancelot through the ring. Now then, Heinrich Zimmer writes about Lancelot when he says, comments on the mythology, that Lancelot never becomes a husband, he doesn't marry, or a father of a family. But of course he becomes a lover. And that's often not the same. In any event, and I quote here a little passage from Heinrich Zimmer, incidentally. Once again, I recommend to everyone, if you want to read some wonderful insights into mythological thinking, particularly in connection with the Arthurian legend, read The King and the Corpse by Heinrich Zimmer, as edited by Joseph Campbell. You know, somewhere in here, Zimmer writes, in this fixed role of the perfect though unvirtuous lover. What an expression. He was both something more and something less than human, namely Lancelot. He dominated the society of the Round Table, and to this day can captivate the imagination. Even in his great defeat, Sir Lancelot was more interesting, more human than the knights whose hearts were pure. So this is the unusual. And one has to make allowances for that. I'm not going to go into any details, but there are really extraordinary, magical people who at the same time behave very weird in society, and you say, what the heck? This is supposed to be a great, wise person, and look at the weird things they do, and the weird things they say, and so forth. Well, this has something to do with that. The world may judge this way or that way, but the important thing about Lancelot is who he is and what he became as the result of his training by the Lady of the Lake. So Zimmer, of course, is right. For here we have once again it's the mercurial archetype of the priest-magician. The feminine counterpart of that is the magician Hetera, such as, for instance, Alexander the Great's mother, things like that, the magical women. And needless to say, the magical women have magical children, and such was the great Alexander who conquered the world. May his memory live forever. So here, this is the kind of archetype we are dealing with, a facilitator of transformation, who by being less than human becomes more than human, by being less than moral becomes more than moral. The hero, especially in the spiritual sense, the transcendental sense, the hero is not someone who can be emulated 100% because he is different, but he can inspire. So to continue with the story, Lancelot grows up and eventually enters King Arthur's court as a knight, because that is the great academy of knighthood. That's where every knight goes who really wants to be a perfect knight. So Lancelot is himself enchanted, and he is the enchanter. Everyone, particularly the queen, who is there already, knows that the mystical fate of both of them, the queen and he, is that they are fated in a mystical sense with each other. and that this is in fact the fatality imposed upon them by the Lady of the Lake. The Lady of the Lake wants certain transformations to take place. She facilitates certain things in the world, and then he chooses the agents who will do that. Chrétien de Troyes, one of the great writer on this subject, a medieval writer, in his opus Lancelot, le Chevalier de la Charrette. And I'll tell you what the charrette is in a minute if your French is rusty. Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, a little wagon. The Knight of the Cart, he gives us the most detailed and romantic account of how, namely Chrétien de Troyes, of how Lancelot and Guinevere came to accomplish their union, and I shall allude to it briefly here. The initial scene is once again rather like the one we encounter in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which we have not dealt with at this time, or the story of Owain and the Lion. There we are, Arthur and the court, including, of course, Lancelot and Queen Guinevere, they are all there. Because that's one thing, too, that people forget. In medieval times, women were not excluded. Where the knights and the king were together, the queen was there, too. And in most all the kingdoms, medieval kingdoms, including of my native country, Hungary, when the king was not able to exercise his powers when he's gone, or where he's sick, or maybe for a while even after his death until the new heir is appointed, the queen is in charge. And that has been inherited by some countries, for instance England, and none other than Winston Churchill said that England was always at its best with its queens. Of course, he said that when Queen Elizabeth II was already on the throne. But he was right. He was right. So to kind of make out the medieval society to be inimical to women is not really correct. Now, so anyway, this kind of has to do with the fact that in the course of Lancelot's, let's say, transformation, there occurs, I'm going to try to summarize it even without my notes, there occurs one of those mystical, magical events that occurred are described as occurring at the court of King Arthur. And in this case, something some kind of weird, probably the Green Knight or somebody like that, some obnoxious being comes in and takes off and takes some of the people with him, including the queen. The queen is abducted. And now is the issue as to who will go after her to rescue her. And who other than Lancelot? Because he already has the connection. The husband, King Arthur, really doesn't. And so the one most qualified is the one who is in love with her, who is going to go and get her. And in the course of that journey to try to find the queen, Lancelot is subjected to various indignities, and there are tests that he has to pass so that he can get eventually to the queen. And one of them is the indignity of having to ride in a cart. Now, apparently, at that particular time of history, to ride in a cart instead of sitting on a horse was a great indignity. So here he is, and sitting in this rickety cart, drawn probably by a disreputable horse, and the peasantry of the countryside jeers him, throws things at him, yells at him, laughs at him and everything, because only unimportant people rode in carts. It was a way in which people were punished. You put them on a cart and let them out, and people were throwing rotten tomatoes at them, if it was the right time of the year for that. But anyway, so he's being put through quite a bit, however, he remains faithful to the task, because he has the intuition within him that comes from his initiation by and training from the Lady of the Lake of what to do in a difficult situation of that sort. And so, in fact, he is told by the inner voices and so in a mysterious manner, I don't remember exactly, but anyway, he is told as when he comes to he's still on horseback initially, and when he comes to the cart, there is a dwarf, a sort of demonic-looking dwarf, Zwerg in German, you know, that is guiding the cart, and the dwarf tells him, "Come on, get on the cart," and he has to tell Lancelot at least 2 times, maybe 3 times, I don't recall exactly, get in the cart, get in the cart. Finally, Lancelot says, "Yeah, I guess I got to do it," and he gets in the cart. Meanwhile, one of the other knights who came along with Lancelot, he remains sitting on the horse and following the cart. So it's a strange procession that proceeds in order to rescue the queen. What are we dealing with here? Well, Arthur, the husband, the king, and his knights are symbolic of the outer world. They are in our own makeup, they are symbolic of our ego, who tries to run everything like a king would. This is that is the established way of the world and the established way of society. But something has to happen. In order to make the great alchemical event come to pass, there must come a secret way, which Carl Jung and the alchemists would probably even call the unlawful way. Not the way of the world, not the way of society, not the way of marriage. You know that the alchemist's work was called opus contra natura, the work against nature, because the kind of transformation that alchemy aims at does not occur in the world, otherwise there wouldn't be any need for alchemists, right? The world is change. The world produces change. And I dare tell you that much of the change that it produces is pretty bad. I am not happy with most of the changes that I came to experience in my life. I could have done without just about all of them, you know. But let's say, so it goes. It is that way. But change only goes so far, because it works with the existing and usually physically available structures. So the changes that are wrought, especially by human will in this world, are usually in the nature of pushing the content of reality around from one place to the other. My favorite metaphor for that is when you have a balloon of water, you fill it with water. Get some water from the lady of the lake and you fill it. And then you can push the balloon and the water will move to another side. And then you can push that side, it'll move over here. But there's nothing new has come in. It's the same old that has been pushed around. And we are there standing heroically and claiming credit for it. Behold how I have changed the world. Okay? I pushed the content of the world a little bit from here to there. Has it become any better? No. Has it become any more exciting? No. Has it become any more just? No. No and no and no. Because I dealt with the existing structure within its own limitations. And that is why the alchemist has to undo the world. Undo it in a spiritual manner. So there is your world, your psyche, your square, earth, water, fire, air, the four functions of consciousness, of sensation, feeling, thinking, and intuition, and it's going to stay that way. Or they might push it around a little bit, but it's not going to produce anything really great. But, on the other hand, when it's broken up in, and now come the various phases of alchemy, the square changes into a triangle, into a circle, now it has been magically transformed. And from that transformation, as it goes on, eventually arises the philosopher's stone. So it's a transformation of a spiritual nature that can only be accomplished by the trained alchemist, and certainly not just somebody who is in love with change for the sake of change. So it was Gawain who also went, accompanied Lancelot to try to rescue the queen, and as they go forth, and Lancelot has been asked by the dwarf to get on the cart. They eventually arrive into this mystical, magical kingdom, which is very ominously described as the kingdom from whence no stranger returns. So it's kind of like that's it. You get in there, buddy, and you're not coming back. You remember the nice movie, The River of No Return, with Marilyn Monroe? She looked best in blue jeans in that one. In any event, it's that kind of thing. It's the place of no return. It's a very weird place to get caught in. But Lancelot, riding the cart, with the dwarf telling him that the queen is in the terrible kingdom, which is the same where other captives are held, captives of Arthur's kingdom. It is described as the kingdom whence no stranger returns, as I mentioned before. And perforce the voyager must remain in that country in servitude and banishment. So it's not really a place that you are very anxious to go to. So Lancelot goes on in his cart, followed at a respectful distance by Gawain on horseback. Now begin a number of tests, which I'm not going to enumerate because they are great on these tests, which the two knights must pass before getting to the place where the queen is. Incidentally, the test of the cart was also offered subsequently to Gawain, namely, get on the cart, for he was also told that by the dwarf. But his self-esteem, his image of respectability, he flatly turned down the cart ride and continued on his horse. So they travel on. Gawain respectfully being saluted by the people as this noble knight on the road, but Lancelot in his cart is, as I mentioned before, is not treated very respectfully. Now the dwarf guides both Lancelot and Gawain to a fortress, and they mount the stairs to a bedchamber in a tower, because after all they sure needed some sleep by then. In the chamber are 3 beds. 2 are ordinary beds. The third is a beautiful bed known as the bed perilous. Now, if you ever go to a hotel or something and you find a bed perilous, turn around and get the heck out of there, because you are in great danger. Anyway, they are told that only someone who truly merits it can sleep in it. Lancelot, without blinking an eye, lies down in the bed perilous, while Gawain, of course, shuns the bed perilous. At midnight, a fiery lance descends from the ceiling, but Lancelot is not seriously hurt either by steel or by fire. He receives a mere scratch. In the morning, the 2 knights leave and are told they may proceed toward the terrible land by way of 2 paths. One leads through water, where one must pass over a bridge that has a great deal of water under it and as well as over it. Now that's not the kind of bridge that I like. And the other bridge, which consists of a sword-like narrow bridge. And there you'll get cut. Gawain chooses the water bridge, which is described as being of lesser difficulty, but Lancelot goes over the most difficult sword bridge, but the road to these bridges itself is long, and he has many tests to endure on the way. So let's do a little bit of interpreting by now. The queen is clearly in what the ancients called Hades. She is in a mysterious and bad place, the kingdom of the dead. Who else was in the kingdom of Hades and then had to be gotten out of there? Persephone. And who was Persephone? Well, she was became the great goddess of the Eleusinian mysteries. So the hints are here that a mystery process is taking place, an initiatic event. And that, of course, needs to be kept in mind. The additional tests really don't matter all that much, but we can mention some of them. So like Persephone, who is the muse of chivalry in this case, is Guinevere. she has been adopted into the underworld, into the other reality. Gawain, of course, reveals himself once again as lacking in real discrimination and understanding. He refuses to get into the cart. He declines to sleep in the bed perilous. Also, he chooses the bridge of water, the lesser obstacle. Gawain reveals three problems. First, he values respectability more than to rescue the queen, which really means rescuing his soul and the soul of everybody. And that's quite a big problem. Second, he does not trust himself that he deserves to lie in the bed perilous. And the explanation we might induce to that is there must be a conviction of our worthiness. We are heroes. We can do it. And when we don't have that confidence, well, then we are not chosen. And we are not able to fulfill the tasks. So there has to be a conviction of our own spiritual worthiness. We are kings, heroes. We are somebody. As the Spanish say, hijo de algo, I am the son of somebody. Because if I am the son of somebody, then I am somebody too, you know. It's quite important. We are not miserable sinners. We are not unworthy beings. These are traps of the underworld that are trying to hold us. And the problem also with good old Gawain is that he is too reasonable. He chooses what reasonably is the lesser danger. On a quest like this, intuition counts for more than reason. So that's really, again, quite important. Forget reason. Do what your spirit dictates. Existential courage is more important than reason. Now that doesn't mean that we want to lead unreasonable lives. There is too damn much unreason in this world already. Let's not add to it, you know. But at some point we must come to the conclusion in our lives that there are factors that we need to employ in life that are other than reason, maybe even beyond reason. Because what we call reason has to do with the thinking function, as we call it in Jungian psychology. And the thinking function is very important. I ideally wish more people would exercise it more often. Because I think there's all too little thinking in this stupid world. There's just no doubt about it. But it's not the ultimate. It will help you up to a certain point, and then what? Well, then come higher things. Intuition, the transcendent function that Jung speaks about. And it's only by way of that that we enter the mysterious land where our queen is imprisoned, is captured, where Persephone is held by the god of the underworld. And so you see that this is the problem. Well, there are many problems, but this is a problem. It's an important one. That there is no formula. There is no single dictum. You know, buddy, you do it this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and every time you hand me another couple of $100 or so, and you are going to get into the mystery. You are going to rescue the queen. No doubt about it. Yeah, well, that's the way of the world, and it's a way of disappointment, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But we have to find out by way of our intuition as to what the next step is, how to go about it now. We have these faculties that give us such perception, but we have to call upon them and we have to use them. And this is one of the other great problems, I think, not that it's not the only one, for sure, of our present world. That when you live in a secular society which has abjured spiritual things, and you want us to become fundamentalists and this, that, and the other thing, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the issue. The issue is that it doesn't make any difference whether it's Jesus Christ or Krishna or Amitabha Buddha, but it can't be nobody. You see, it can't be nobody and nothing. Why? Because out of nothing there comes only nothing. So if what we consider to be the world of transcendence is nothing, then what are we trying to do? We are trying to get somewhere by nothing, and it's not going to work. So that is why the recognition of transcendence, the recognition of a transcendental principle, whatever you call it, of the higher power is essential. Without it, ultimately we run into blank walls. I like to quote that little incident, I will do it, of C.G. Jung, when the two guys who founded Alcoholics Anonymous came to him and they presented to him their plan of this organization, and he looked it over and he said, there's something missing. And what is missing? Missing is a direct, a creative reference to a higher power. If you don't address yourself to a higher power by trying to cure people addicted to this, that, and the other thing, it's never going to work. Never going to work. And they listened to him, and it's in there. I have never been part of AA because for one thing I never needed it, and I like my talk better. I'm not going to give it up for any AA, but like a good Hungarian should. But let us say, when the transcendent is exorcised or trivialized even, then we have a great deal of trouble. And so this is a way of symbolizing that particular difficulty. In a purely secular way, we are only going to get to further secular things. And maybe we are already pretty doggone tired of those, at least I am. Anyway, Lancelot is subjected to even more tests, which we don't need to go into their details, and he recognizes that one of the final big initiatory experiences, which I think makes the story of Lancelot sometimes quite dear to members of the Masonic order, that he comes to a grave, he comes to a catafalque, a tomb, and he recognizes with his intuition, which is sufficiently awakened, that this was the tomb that was intended for himself. Oh dear. there is a monk that guides him around there, and the monk is amazed and says again that this is the tomb for the one who shall deliver all those who are languishing in exile in this kingdom, including the queen. In other words, the rescuer, this is the rescuer, the rescuer's tomb. Now, clearly this is also, since it comes out of a Christian mythos, a reference to the Holy Sepulchre, and Lancelot is revealed as a certain kind of a Christ figure, as someone who helps the souls to get out of Hades. And so he removes the lid from this tomb, and he is recreating in his own fashion a resurrection. And then he moves away a stone from the tomb, and is thus revealed as the one who rescues. So now what happens when one removes the lid of the coffin in our own lives? One looks within. One opens up the grave. And this is the confrontation with death, the becoming familiar with what lies within the tomb. But we may also introduce something else, which is the secret behind the secret. And for that one I can mainly recommend the little booklet of my late teacher, Dr. Alvin Boyd Kuhn, on the lost meaning of death, because esoterically, clear back into ancient Egypt, the two categories were reversed. Those who are not initiated into the mysteries yet, they look upon physical death as a calamity, and they make all the mummies and so forth. But what if death is life in this world? What if we are the dead who need to resurrect, to rise from the tomb? Whether it's Hiram Abiff or whether it's Jesus Christ or whoever, that is the secret, which undoubtedly has remained a secret to many. But Lancelot, intuitively, because a lot of his earlier experience comes to recognize that, and he now talks with the king of the dead, and he is released along with all the people who have been imprisoned there, including, most importantly, Queen Guinevere. So what happens now? They go back to Camelot, and let me see, am I missing here? Yeah, well, there is warfare breaks out, and Arthur and his knights are in the battle, and King Arthur and Queen Guinevere, and also by Gawain, who ends up occupying a position very much inferior to Lancelot. So anyway, there is a big war which they win, and ultimately again other tests are made, and he goes out because he now finally found the queen. This is the ultimate test. He found the queen of his heart, the object of all his quest and desire and aspiration. And what does she do when he goes up to her? She turns away from him and totally ignores and rejects him. pretty cruel, dear Queenie. So she doesn't even want to talk to him. So Lancelot is really devastated and dumbfounded. I mean, I went out and rescued you, you know. He goes out and tries to kill himself, which is, of course, the ultimate act of love, you know. I die for you. In any other, you see, in any event, but the queen to the queen's eventual delight, he does not succeed in killing himself. So many other torments follow poor Lancelot, until at last he is ushered again into the queen's presence, and now in desperation and incredible anguish he asks, why? Why is she treating him like this? Why is she displeased with him? And the answer comes, because you hesitated to mount the cart for 2 whole steps. You actually hesitated for 2 steps before getting in, even though you were told that you could find out about my whereabouts and rescue me by getting into the cart. This is the reason why I would neither speak with you or look at you. So, you know, here's, I mean, the punishment of the great lady. Lancelot, who crossed the bridge like the Chimwad bridge of the Zoroastrians, the razor that means, what does it mean? He finally got there by balance. Only the balanced individual can cross the sword bridge, and many other events of this sort which rectify, let us say, his position. So, and then we heard that was a final battle, and in discussing the cause, it is particularly bad because not even for 2 steps in the discourse of the queen to him, not even for 2 steps space should one put whatever social respectability ahead of the welfare of the goddess of the soul, which she is. Don't be too proud to do what you need to do. So the whole message of Lancelot and Guinevere is the path of the great internal romance, the great intrapsychic love affair, is a path of darkness, the path of the forbidden, the path of something that the world does not understand. And the symbolism is that it is an adulterous affair. But the real meaning is that if anything is more important to you than finding, in this case, the anima or the animus, of going on with the individuation, of coming to the point of transformation, then you are worthless. And you have to be willing to forego your respectability, your values, your societal ambience, anything of that sort. If you should not value anything more highly than your internal divinity, which in this case is the Anima goddess. And you can't have it both ways. The world will, and the rulers of the world will tell you that they will give various excuses, but it isn't true. So, like an illustrative event in the story, which I will conclude with, is, we must tell it very briefly, when Lancelot was seduced from faithfulness to the goddess, the lady of his life, because that also happens. He has an affair with another lady there, and he finds out that that's not what he wanted. He was bewitched by sorcery to establish a liaison with Dame Elaine, who had a friend, a witch named Brazen, who worked the spells. So he was under a love spell. That's such a good excuse, real good excuse. Oh, well, I was under a spell. And this Elaine had a son by him, who then became Galahad. That was what his old name was his. And who became the future hero in later legends. Now Lancelot was exiled for this, and so was Elaine. But Elaine was the one who could have married, for she was without a husband, unlike Queen Guinevere. He spent much time with her, but he discovered that his destiny was the queen, the married woman. He could not marry the mother of his son. He was not a husband, he was a messenger of the Lady of the Lake, the master of the forbidden life, the hero of transformation, by way of what the world calls sin. He belonged to Guinevere, see? Now, certainly from a Christian theological point of view, and so these are very heretical ideas, but they come up again and again, and they have to do with the fact that you are not to fulfill your destiny by doing what the world wants you to do. That was not your destiny. That's behind you. So you have to use your intuitive sense, you have to use your spiritual wisdom to know what to do in order to facilitate the great transformation. It has nothing to do with society, it has nothing to do with real marriages, it has to do with the manner in which you have to proceed to become really yourself. As the Lady of the Lake has instructed you when you were underneath the waters of the unconscious, and when she was able to do that. And that is the denouement and the transformation of Lancelot. That there are other things that go on, there are other battles, there are people who die, and all kinds of things. That's part of the elaboration of the story. But the important thing is that he managed to work his way through to all the obstacles, all the prejudices, all the rules of society, all the rules of knighthood, to Guinevere, to the goddess, to the Anima, to the one whom he had to unite with in order to be truly himself. And no doubt it may sound to you like a circuitous way of telling a story, and I told the story also a little bit too long. But let's say, if we can derive from it the command that there is something here for us to do, then we also will be instructed by the Lady of the Lake. And we also will go through our own transformation, and then to what in ancient times was called the hieros gamos, the holy wedding of the human and the divine, the outer and the inner, the masculine and the feminine, and the result of which is the philosopher's stone, the transformed being, the transformed world. Are we willing to do that? Well, if we are not willing, then there's something wrong. We should recognize our opportunities and we should proceed in that fashion, because that more than anything else is the purpose of our lives. If we cannot do that, if we cannot place the great work, the great transformation, the great union above all other considerations, then we have betrayed our authentic selfhood. We have betrayed the Lady of the Lake, and then we are truly not worthy. But we all have the capacity to do that, and when the time comes, may we have the insight, the wisdom, the intuition, and the fortitude to do so, and then indeed all will be well. And the sun and the moon and the light and the darkness have united, and out of it comes the great miracle. The miracle of the philosopher's stone, the miracle of the reunited human, the miracle of salvation and redemption and transformation, which is our destiny. And if we take these hints that we find in history and in mythology to heart, then perhaps we will follow them when the occasion arises, and then we can say that the purpose of our lives here on earth has been accomplished. So it was a little bit long, but it's a long story and a very good one, and I hope that you like it. Thank you very much.